The stars burned cold and distant as Commander Sarah Chen watched the enemy fleet advance across her tactical display. Red dots filled the screen like a spreading disease. Each dot represented a Zarakian warship, and there were hundreds of them. "Distance to enemy fleet?" Chen asked, her hands gripping the armrests of her command chair. 2 million kilometers and closing, Lieutenant Marcus Webb answered from his station. His voice was steady, but Chen noticed the slight tremor in his fingers as they moved across the controls. "They'll be in weapons range in 12 minutes. Chen looked around the bridge of the Indomitable. Her crew worked with focused intensity, preparing for the battle they all knew was coming. Some of them were afraid. She could see it in their eyes, in the way they moved. But fear was good. Fear kept you sharp. Fear kept you alive. "All ships, report status!" Fleet Commander Thaxoon's voice crackled through the communication system. The Valorian commander sounded calm, but Chen had learned to read the subtle clicks in his insectoid speech patterns. He was worried. One by one, the coalition ships reported in. The fleet was a mix of different species, each bringing their own technology and fighting styles to the battle. The Valorian cruisers were heavily armored but slow. The Kraith medical frigates hung back, ready to rescue wounded. The Silvari scouts darted between larger ships like silver fish in a dark ocean. And then there was the Indomitable, humanity's contribution to the coalition defense fleet. She was smaller than the Valorian cruisers, faster than the Kraith frigates, and more aggressive than any ship in the fleet. The other species had learned to respect human ships, even if they didn't always understand human tactics. "Indomitable ready for combat," Chen reported. "All weapons armed. Missile batteries at full capacity." "Acknowledged, Commander Chen," Thaxoon replied. "Hold your position in the defensive line." Chen bit back her response. Holding position wasn't the human way. Humans struck first, struck hard, and kept striking until the enemy broke. But this wasn't a human fleet. This was a coalition operation, and she had to follow orders. The Zorokians appeared on the visual display, and Chen felt her stomach tighten. The enemy ships were organic, twisted things that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Dark purple hulls pulsed with sickly green light. The Zorokians didn't just destroy their enemies, they absorbed them, taking their technology and their biomass to make themselves stronger. "Enemy fleet entering weapons range," Webb announced. "All ships, open fire," Thaxoon ordered. The space between the two fleets erupted in light and violence. Missiles streaked across the void, leaving trails of burning fuel. Energy beams cut through the darkness like swords. The Valorian cruisers fired their heavy plasma cannons in steady, methodical volleys. The Kraith ships launched defensive drones that created shields of interlocking energy fields. Chen watched the tactical display, analyzing the enemy formation. The Zorokians were using a standard swarm pattern, overwhelming their opponents with numbers. It was effective, brutally so. Already, 3 coalition ships showed critical damage on her screen. "Webb, target the enemy cruiser at grid reference 7-4, Chen ordered. "Fire all forward missile tubes." "Firing," Webb confirmed. The Indomitable shuddered as 20 missiles launched from her forward tubes. They accelerated toward the Zorokian cruiser, weaving through defensive fire with programmed evasion patterns. 16 of them were destroyed by enemy point defense systems. 4 got through. The explosions bloomed against the Zorokian hull like flowers made of fire. The enemy ship's organic armor buckled and tore. Green fluid leaked into space, freezing instantly in the vacuum. "Direct hit," Webb reported. "Enemy cruiser showing heavy damage. Good. Reload and acquire next target." But Chen could see the bigger picture on her tactical display. For every enemy ship they damaged, 2 more pressed forward. The Zorokians had numbers on their side. They could afford losses. The coalition couldn't. "All ships, fighting retreat to Kepler Station," Thaxoon ordered. "We need to buy time for the civilian evacuation." Chen's jaw clenched. Retreat. The word tasted bitter in her mouth, but she understood the necessity. There were millions of civilians on the planets deeper in the system. If the fleet fell here, those people would die. "Indomitable acknowledging retreat order," Chen said. "Engines to half power. Maintain rearguard position." The coalition fleet began pulling back in good order, still firing as they withdrew. The Zorokians pursued, sensing weakness. Their ships surged forward, hungry for victory. Chen saw a Kraith medical frigate take a direct hit from a Zorokian plasma weapon. The small ship's shields collapsed, and its hull began to breach. Dozens of medical staff and wounded soldiers would die if someone didn't help them. "Webb, plot intercept course for that Kraith frigate," Chen ordered. "Emergency speed." "Commander, that will put us directly in the enemy's line of fire," Webb protested. "I know. Do it anyway." The Indomitable surged forward, her engines burning bright. Chen positioned her ship between the damaged Kraith frigate and the advancing Zorokians. Energy beams and plasma bolts hammered against the Indomitable's shields. Warning alarms screamed across the bridge. "Shields at 40%, Webb shouted over the noise. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 9. "Keep us between them and that frigate," Chen ordered. "Return fire with everything we have." The Indomitable's weapons blazed, pouring missiles and energy beams into the Zorokian formation. Chen felt each impact through the deck beneath her feet. Her ship was taking terrible damage, but the Kraith frigate was moving away, pulling back to safety behind the coalition lines. "Commander Chen, withdraw immediately," Thaxun ordered. "You've done enough." Chen guided her ship back toward the fleet, still firing. The Zorokians let her go, satisfied with the damage they had inflicted. The Indomitable limped back to the coalition lines, trailing atmosphere and debris. "Damage report," Chen demanded. Webb's face was pale as he read the report scrolling across his screen. "Shields down to 18%. Hull integrity at 62%. We've lost weapons pods 3 and 5. And Commander..." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Our missile reserves are down to 23%. Chen nodded slowly, processing the information. The battle had barely begun, and they were already running out of ammunition. She looked at the tactical display, at the hundreds of red dots still advancing. The Zorokians had barely been scratched. The coalition fleet regrouped near Kepler Station, battered and bleeding. Ships that had started the day gleaming and proud now drifted in formation with scorched hulls and failing systems. Chen counted the losses: 7 ships destroyed, 14 more too damaged to fight effectively, and the Zorokians kept coming. Chen stared at the approaching enemy fleet and felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. They were going to lose this battle. The math was simple and brutal. The coalition didn't have enough ammunition, enough ships, or enough time to stop the invasion, unless someone did something crazy. Chen's fingers moved across her command console, pulling up the Indomitable's technical specifications. Ship mass, engine capacity, maximum acceleration. She began running calculations, her mind working through the physics of motion and energy. Webb noticed what she was doing. "Commander? What are you calculating?" Chen didn't answer. She was too focused on the numbers appearing on her screen. Mass times velocity squared, divided by 2. The kinetic energy formula. But at relativistic speeds, the formula changed. It became something much more powerful, something that might change everything. The briefing room aboard Kepler Station smelled like burned electronics and recycled air. Fleet Commander Thaxun stood at the head of the table. His 4 arms crossed in what Chen had learned was a Valorian gesture of deep concern. Around the table, holographic projections showed the faces of every ship captain in the fleet. "We have perhaps 6 hours before the Zorokians reach this station," Thaxun said. His mandibles clicked together nervously. "I need options." Captain Vrel of the Valorian cruiser, Steadfast, spoke first. "We continue the fighting retreat. Draw them deeper into the system where defensive platforms can support us." Those platforms were destroyed in the first wave, a Kraith captain pointed out, her voice a melodic whistle. We have no support waiting for us. Then we scatter, suggested a Sylvari commander, his silver skin flickering with agitated patterns. Use guerrilla tactics. Hit and run until reinforcements arrive. Reinforcements are 3 days away, Thaxoon said flatly. The civilians cannot evacuate in time. If we scatter, the Zerakians will ignore us and slaughter millions. Silence fell over the briefing room. Every captain knew the truth. They were out of time, out of ammunition, and out of options. Thaxoon's compound eyes swept across the assembled faces, stopping on Chen. Commander Chen, your ship took heavy damage protecting the Kraith frigate. Your tactical display shows you have exhausted most of your missile reserves. Chen nodded. Yes, Commander. We have enough missiles for maybe one more engagement. After that, we'll be down to energy weapons only. And energy weapons require close range against Izarokian organic armor, Thaxoon observed. Which means exposing your ship to concentrated enemy fire. Yes, Commander. Thaxoon's mandibles clicked again. Chen could see him struggling with the question he needed to ask. Finally, he spoke. Commander Chen, your vessel has exhausted its ammunition reserves. What can humanity offer now? Chen had been waiting for this question. She had spent the last 2 hours running calculations, checking and rechecking her math. The numbers were clear, brutal, but clear. She took a deep breath. Permission to speak freely, Commander? Granted. Chen stood, pulling up a holographic display of the Indomitable. My ship masses 47,000 tons. Our engines can accelerate us to approximately 0.4 the speed of light given enough time and space. The other captains looked confused. Vrel spoke up. Commander Chen, we are discussing combat tactics, not physics lessons. Chen ignored him. Her fingers moved through the holographic display, pulling up equations. At 0.4 the speed of light, the kinetic energy of my ship would be approximately 3.8 times 10 to the 23rd power joules. The room went silent. Several captains were running their own calculations now, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror. That's not a weapon, breathed the Sylvari commander. That's planetary destruction. Yes, Chen agreed. Give me a clear acceleration lane, and I can turn the Indomitable into the most powerful weapon in this system. Thaxoon's compound eyes fixed on Chen with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You are proposing to use your ship as a kinetic missile to ram the enemy fleet at relativistic speeds. Yes, Commander. That would be suicide. Your crew would die. Chen met his gaze steadily. We can evacuate the crew. I only need 2 people to pilot the ship. Myself and 1 volunteer. I volunteer, Webb said immediately from his position at the far end of the table. Chen nodded to him, then turned back to Thaxoon. 2 lives for the survival of millions. The math works, Commander. Captain Vrel's voice was sharp with disbelief. This is insane. No species would sacrifice a ship in such a manner. The cost, the waste. The cost of doing nothing is higher, Chen interrupted. The Zerakians will destroy this fleet. They will kill every civilian in this system. And then they will move on to the next system and the next, absorbing everything in their path. Thaxoon was silent for a long moment. His forearms moved in complex patterns, a Valorian gesture Chen couldn't interpret. Finally, he spoke. I have fought alongside humans for 2 years now. I have learned that your species calculates risk differently than ours. You weigh survival not just in individual lives, but in... He paused, searching for words. In what you call strategic necessity. We do what needs to be done, Chen said simply, even when what needs to be done is impossible. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Especially then. Thaxoon looked around at the other captains. Does anyone have a better plan? Silence answered him. He turned back to Chen. Very well, Commander. You have authorization to proceed. What do you need? Chen pulled up a tactical map of the system. I need a clear acceleration lane at least 5 million kilometers long. No debris, no gravity wells to pull us off course. The Xerokians will need to be grouped tight enough that the impact energy spreads through their formation. They always cluster when they sense victory, the Silvari commander noted. They will group tight as they push for the station. Then we use that against them, Chen said. She traced a line on the tactical map. The fleet creates a diversion here, drawing the Xerokians into a tight formation. The Indomitable begins acceleration from behind the station, hidden by its mass. By the time the Xerokians detect us, we'll be moving too fast for them to intercept effectively. Vrel studied the map with critical eyes. The timing must be perfect. If the fleet breaks too early, the Xerokians will scatter. If they break too late, they will be caught in the impact zone. I trust your tactical skills, Captain, Chen said. This plan requires us to risk our own ships as bait, Vrel pointed out. Yes, but it gives us a chance to win. Right now, we have no chance at all. Thaxoon made a decision. We will do this. Captain Vrel, coordinate with the other ship commanders. I want a diversion that will make the Xerokians think we are making our final stand. Commander Chen, you have 4 hours to prepare your ship and evacuate your crew. The meeting ended, and the holographic projections winked out one by one. Chen remained standing, staring at the tactical map. 4 hours to prepare for death. It seemed like both too much time and not enough. Webb approached her. We should get back to the ship, Commander. In a moment. Chen studied the map, memorizing the trajectory. There would be no room for error. At relativistic speeds, even a slight miscalculation would send them past the enemy fleet, wasting everything. Commander, Webb said quietly, thank you for letting me volunteer. Chen looked at him. Webb had served with her for 3 years. He was a good officer, dedicated and brave. He deserved to live, to go home, to have a future. But he also deserved the choice. Are you sure? She asked. I am. Someone needs to make sure you don't miscalculate the course. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Besides, if we're going to throw the ship at the enemy, I want to make sure we don't miss. Chen nodded. There was nothing else to say. They had made their choice, and now they would see it through. They returned to the Indomitable to find the crew already preparing for evacuation. Engineering teams were modifying the ship's systems, removing safety protocols that would normally prevent the kind of acceleration Chen was planning. Every unnecessary component was being stripped away, reducing mass and maximizing speed. Chief Engineer Rodriguez met them at the airlock. Commander, I've removed the safeties from the main engines. You'll be able to push past rated capacity, but the engines will burn out after about 20 minutes of sustained acceleration. That's all we need, Chen assured her. 20 minutes will get us to 0.4 light speed. Rodriguez nodded, her expression grim. The crew wants to stay, Commander. Every single one of them volunteered. Chen felt a tightness in her chest. I know they did. But I need them alive. This fleet will need experienced crew after the battle. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. All personnel except essential bridge crew are to evacuate immediately. That's an order. The crew obeyed, but Chen saw the reluctance in their movements. They were leaving their ship, their home. Watching them file into the evacuation shuttles was harder than Chen had expected. The bridge of the Indomitable felt empty with just 2 people on it. Chen sat in her command chair, running through final system checks. Webb occupied the navigation station, his hands moving steadily across the controls. Outside the viewports, Kepler Station drifted past as they positioned the ship for its final mission. All crew evacuated, Webb reported. We're the only ones left aboard. Chen nodded. The silence felt wrong. A ship this size should have had dozens of crew members, voices calling out reports, the constant hum of activity. Now there was just the quiet beep of instruments and the low thrum of idling engines. Final preparations complete, Chen said into the communication system. Indomitable, ready for launch. Acknowledged, Commander Chen. Thaksun's voice came back. The fleet is moving into position. We will draw the Zorokians into formation as planned. You will have your acceleration lane. Chen watched her tactical display as the coalition ships spread out across space. It was a beautiful piece of coordination. Each ship knew its role, moving with practiced precision. The Valorian cruisers took up positions in the center, their heavy armor drawing attention. The smaller ships darted around the edges, harassing and provoking. And the Zorokians took the bait. The enemy fleet surged forward, sensing what they thought was a desperate last stand. They grouped together, their organic ships clustering like cells in diseased tissue. Perfect. The tighter they packed, the more effective Chen's impact would be. Zorokian fleet entering target zone, Webb reported. Formation density optimal. Chen's hands tightened on her controls. Fleet command, this is Indomitable. Beginning acceleration run. Understood, Commander. May your ancestors guide you. Chen pushed the throttle forward. The Indomitable's engines roared to life, pushing against the vacuum of space. Acceleration pressed Chen back into her chair. The force built gradually as the engines gained power. 1 gravity, 2 gravities, 3. Acceleration at 4 gravities and climbing, Webb announced, his voice strained by the pressure. Engine output at 110% of rated capacity. The Indomitable shot forward, leaving Kepler Station behind. Stars began to stretch and distort as their velocity climbed. Chen kept her eyes on the tactical display, watching the distance to the Zorokian fleet decrease with terrifying speed. 5 gravities, Webb called out. Velocity at 0.02 light speed. The acceleration pressed down on Chen like a physical weight. Breathing became difficult. Every movement required effort, but her hands remained steady on the controls, guiding the ship along its calculated trajectory. The Zorokian fleet noticed them now. Red warning indicators appeared on Chen's display as enemy sensors locked onto the Indomitable. But the enemy ships were grouped around the coalition fleet, committed to their attack. They couldn't break formation quickly enough to intercept. Enemy vessels attempting to target us, Webb reported, but our speed and angle are making it difficult for them. Energy beams lashed out from the nearest Zorokian ships, trying to hit the accelerating destroyer. Most missed completely, fired by targeting computers that couldn't compensate for the Indomitable's velocity. A few struck glancing blows, scoring lines across the hull, but failing to slow them down. Shields holding at 60%, Chen said. Keep us on course. The universe outside contracted to a narrow tunnel of light. At these speeds, the Doppler effect shifted everything ahead into blue-shifted brilliance while the stars behind faded to red. Physics became Chen's enemy and ally simultaneously, the laws of relativity both limiting and empowering their desperate gambit. 0.1 light speed, Webb announced. 10 minutes to 0.4. More Zorokian ships broke formation, trying to intercept the Indomitable. Chen watched them on her display, calculating angles and velocities in her head. The enemy was spreading out, trying to create a wall of fire between her ship and their fleet. Evasive pattern Delta 3, Chen ordered. The Indomitable twisted through space, her engines firing in controlled bursts to shift their trajectory. G-forces slammed Chen sideways, then forward, then back. Her vision grayed at the edges, but she fought to stay conscious. If she blacked out now, it was over. Taking fire from multiple vectors, Webb gasped. Shields down to 40%. A massive Zorokian cruiser loomed ahead. Directly in their path, its weapons batteries glowed with building energy. Chen could see the organic structure of the ship, pulsing veins carrying power to its weapons. It was going to fire everything it had at point-blank range. Hold course, Chen commanded. Commander, we're going to hit them. That's the idea. Divert all remaining shield power forward. The Zerokian cruiser fired. Multiple plasma beams converged on the Indomitable, striking the forward shields with enough force to vaporize a normal ship. Alarms screamed across the bridge. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency red lighting. But the Indomitable kept moving. They struck the Zerokian cruiser at .2 light speed. At that velocity, the enemy ship might as well have been made of paper. The Indomitable's reinforced bow punched through the organic hull, entering one side of the ship and exiting the other in less than a second. The Zerokian cruiser exploded behind them, torn apart by the kinetic energy transfer. "Shields collapsed," Webb reported, his voice hoarse. "Hull breaches on multiple decks, losing atmosphere on decks 4 through 9. Seal them. Keep the engines running." The Indomitable continued its desperate acceleration, trailing debris and freezing atmosphere. More Zerokian ships fired on them, and without shields, every hit tore into the hull. Metal screamed and buckled, bulkheads collapsed. Systems failed one by one. ".3 light speed," Webb called out. 7 minutes to impact velocity. A Zerokian plasma lance, a weapon designed to cut through capital ships, struck the bridge. The entire forward section of the Indomitable exploded. Chen felt the deck lurch beneath her, felt the horrible rushing sensation of atmosphere escaping. Her command chair's emergency seal activated, wrapping her in a protective cocoon of force fields and emergency air. Through the flickering displays still functioning, she saw Webb's station go dark. "Webb, status!" "I'm alive," Webb's voice came through her helmet communicator. "But the bridge is gone. We need to get to engineering." Chen unstrapped from her ruined command chair and pulled herself through the destroyed bridge. Without gravity, every movement had to be calculated. She found Webb clinging to a bulkhead, his own emergency suit activated. Together, they navigated through the wreckage to the corridor beyond. The ship shuddered around them as more hits tore into the hull. Chen and Webb pulled themselves hand over hand through corridors filled with floating debris. Sparks showered from damaged electrical systems. Fires burned in strange patterns in the zero gravity, consuming oxygen in spherical blooms of flame. They reached engineering to find Rodriguez's modifications still holding. The engines burned bright and steady, pushing the Indomitable ever faster. Chen pulled herself to the manual control station, a backup system designed for emergencies exactly like this. .35 light speed, Webb reported from another console. 4 minutes to impact velocity. Chen pulled up the tactical display. They were close now, so close to the Zerokian fleet she could see individual ships. The enemy had finally realized what was happening. Ships were breaking formation, trying to scatter. But they were too late and too slow. The Indomitable was moving too fast for them to evade. 3 minutes, Webb said. The Zerokians threw everything they had at the incoming destroyer. Energy beams, missiles, plasma weapons, all converged on the Indomitable. The hull couldn't take much more. Chen watched damage reports scroll across her screen faster than she could read them. "Engineering section breached," Webb shouted. "We're losing engine control." "Reroute to manual," Chen ordered. "Keep us on target." 2 minutes. Chen's hands flew across the controls, making micro-adjustments to their course. At this speed, even a small deviation would send them past the enemy fleet. She couldn't let that happen. Everyone was counting on them. The coalition fleet, the civilians, everyone. "Commander, the hull is failing," Webb said. "We're not going to make it." Chen looked at him across the engineering bay. His face was pale, streaked with blood from a cut above his eye. But his hands were steady on the controls, holding their course true. "Then we rig a dead man switch," Chen said. "If we die, the ship continues on course automatically." They worked together, linking the manual controls to the ship's emergency autopilot. It was crude, requiring them to hard-code the trajectory into the system, but it would work. If they lost consciousness, if they died, the Indomitable would complete its mission. 1 minute. The ship screamed its death around them. Hull plates tore away, exposing the interior to vacuum. The engines sputtered, running on failing power systems. But they were still accelerating, still moving, still closing the distance. .39 light speed, Webb reported. 30 seconds to impact. Chen could see the Zorokian flagship now, massive and terrible. It was the heart of their fleet, the command ship that coordinated their assault. If the Indomitable struck it directly, the energy released would be catastrophic for every ship nearby. 20 seconds. Webb, the escape pod, Chen said suddenly. Can we still launch it? Webb checked his console. Maybe, if we're fast. Go, now! They ran, or rather pulled themselves with desperate speed through the failing ship. The escape pod was mounted near engineering, a small survival craft meant for exactly this kind of emergency. They threw themselves inside, and Chen slammed the launch button. The pod shot away from the Indomitable just as the final Zorokian barrage struck the destroyer. The engineering section exploded, sending fragments of the ship spinning in every direction, but the forward section, the heaviest part, continued on its path. Through the pod's tiny viewport, Chen watched her ship complete its final mission. The escape pod tumbled through space, its damaged stabilizers failing to correct the spin. Chen fought against the centrifugal force, reaching for the manual controls. Next to her, Webb hung unconscious in his restraints, blood floating in small droplets from the cut on his forehead. "Webb!" Chen called out, but he didn't respond. She checked his vital signs on the pod's medical display. Alive, but hurt. They both were. The escape had been violent, and the pod had taken damage from debris. Chen managed to get one hand on the control stick, fighting the spin to orient the pod's viewport toward the Zorokian fleet. She needed to see. She needed to know if their sacrifice had meant something. Through the small window, the Indomitable was a dark shape against the stars, trailing fire and debris. But it was still moving, still accelerating toward the enemy fleet on the course Chen had programmed. The dead man's switch had worked. Chen watched the tactical display on the pod's limited systems. Distance to impact. 5 seconds. 4. 3. The moment seemed to stretch into infinity. Chen thought about her crew, safely aboard other ships. She thought about the civilians evacuating deeper in the system. She thought about all the choices that had led to this moment, this impossible gambit that might save them all or mean nothing. 2. 1. The Indomitable struck the Zorokian flagship. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then physics caught up with reality. The kinetic energy of 47,000 tons moving at .39, the speed of light was released in an instant. The Zorokian flagship didn't explode so much as cease to exist. The organic hull vaporized on contact, molecules ripped apart by forces no structure could withstand. The ship's interior, its crew, its weapons, everything converted to superheated plasma in a microsecond. But the energy had nowhere to go. It expanded outward in a sphere of destruction, a miniature star born in the depths of space. The light was blinding, even through the escape pod's polarized viewport. Chen closed her eyes, but the brilliance burned through her eyelids. The shock wave followed a heartbeat later. Fragments of the Zorokian flagship, now traveling at significant fractions of light speed themselves, tore through the tightly packed enemy formation. Each piece was a weapon, carrying enough kinetic energy to obliterate anything it touched. The Zorokian ships closest to the flagship simply vanished, destroyed so quickly they didn't have time to react. Those further away fared little better. The expanding plasma cloud engulfed them, temperatures reaching millions of degrees. Organic hulls boiled away. Internal systems melted. Crew died without knowing what had killed them. Chen forced her eyes open, needing to see despite the pain. The tactical display showed red dots winking out by the dozens. 30 Zorokian ships gone. 40. 50. The destruction spread through the enemy formation like a plague. each ship's death contributing to the chaos. The escape pod's proximity alarms screamed. A piece of debris, maybe part of a Zorokian cruiser, maybe part of the Indomitable, tumbled toward them. Chen tried to fire the maneuvering thrusters, but they were damaged, unresponsive. She could only watch as the debris came closer. It missed by less than 100 meters, close enough that she could see the twisted metal and melted components, close enough to feel the terror of how close they had come to dying after everything. The shock wave reached the outer edges of the Zorokian formation. Ships there had time to react, firing engines to escape the destruction. But they were scattered now, their tight formation broken, individual ships fleeing in all directions, abandoning the attack, abandoning their mission. Chen tried to access broader communication channels, but the escape pod's systems were too limited. She could only listen to scattered transmissions, voices shouting in multiple languages as the Coalition fleet witnessed what had happened. "The flagship is destroyed," someone was saying. "Multiple enemy vessels destroyed. The formation is breaking. All ships, advance." That was Thaxoon's voice, strong and clear. "The humans have given us victory. We will not waste it." Through the viewport, Chen could see the Coalition fleet moving forward. The Valorian cruisers led the charge, their heavy weapons firing into the scattered Zorokian ships. The smaller vessels darted between enemies, targeting vulnerable systems. The tide of battle was turning. A Zorokian destroyer, fleeing from the Coalition advance, passed close to the escape pod. For a terrible moment, Chen thought it had detected them. The enemy ship's weapons would make short work of the tiny pod. But the destroyer continued past without slowing, too focused on escape to notice one small target. The battle raged for hours. Chen drifted in the escape pod, unable to do anything but watch and wait. Webb regained consciousness after an hour, groggy and confused. Chen explained what had happened, watching his expression change from confusion to amazement to grief as he realized the Indomitable was gone. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," Chen said simply. "It worked." They watched the Coalition fleet methodically destroy or drive off the remaining Zorokian ships. The enemy that had seemed unstoppable hours ago was now in full retreat. Ships that had been hunting the Coalition were now hunted, picked off one by a fleet that fought with renewed purpose. A Silvari scout ship finally detected the escape pod's emergency beacon. The small craft approached carefully, its pilot wary of debris. A docking tube extended, connecting to the pod's airlock. "Commander Chen?" a voice called through the tube. "Lieutenant Webb, can you hear us?" "We're here," Chen responded. "Both alive. Webb needs medical attention. Stand by for extraction." Silvari crew members pulled them from the pod and into the scout ship. Medical scanners swept over them, assessing injuries. Webb had a concussion and several broken ribs. Chen had burns from radiation exposure and countless bruises. But they were alive. The scout pilot, a young Silvari male with rapid flickering skin patterns that Chen recognized as excitement, couldn't stop talking. "You did it. Everyone thought you were dead, but you did it. The Zorokians are running. We're going to win." Chen let him talk. She was too tired to respond, too overwhelmed by the enormity of what had happened. The Indomitable was gone. Her ship, her home for 3 years, reduced to scattered atoms somewhere in the debris field. But the fleet would survive. The civilians would survive. The cost was high, but the alternative had been extinction. The scout ship brought them to Kepler Station, where the Coalition fleet was regrouping. As they docked, Chen could see the damage the fleet had taken. Every ship bore scars from the battle. Several were barely holding together, kept functional only by heroic damage control efforts. But they were there. They had survived. Thaxoon was waiting for them at the docking port. The Valorian fleet commander stood with his forearms spread in what Chen had learned was a gesture of respect and welcome. Behind him, representatives from every species in the coalition waited. Chen and Webb were helped from the scout ship by medical personnel. Chen tried to stand at attention to show proper military bearing, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. A medic caught her before she fell. "Commander Chen," Thaxoon said, his voice carrying through the docking bay. "Lieutenant Webb, you have our gratitude and our respect." "We did what needed to be done, Commander," Chen replied. "Is the battle won?" "The Zerokians are retreating. We are pursuing, but they pose no further threat to this system. The civilians are safe." Chen nodded. Safe. That was what mattered. That was what the Indomitable had died for. "Your crew is being assembled," Thaxoon continued. "They will want to see that you survived." "Our crew," Chen repeated softly. She had a crew without a ship now. What would happen to them? Thaxoon seemed to read her thoughts. His mandibles clicked in a pattern she had learned meant reassurance. "We will discuss the future later. For now, rest. You have earned it." Medical personnel took Chen and Webb to the station's hospital. As they were carried away, Chen looked back at the docking bay, at the damaged ships beyond. The Coalition fleet had been tested today and had not broken. They had learned that desperate times called for desperate measures. They had learned that sometimes the only weapon left was the ship itself. And they had learned that humanity would do whatever it took to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Chen closed her eyes as the medical bed carried her down the corridor. She could still see the moment of impact replaying in her mind, the terrible beauty of that explosion. She knew it would haunt her dreams for years to come. But they had won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. They had won. The Indomitable was gone, but its legacy would endure. Other ships, other captains, would remember what happened at Kepler's Edge. They would remember that when ammunition ran out, when all conventional options were exhausted, there was always one more choice, the human choice. 2 weeks after the battle, Chen stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on Valorian Prime. Her arm was still in a medical brace, and she moved with the careful slowness of someone whose body was still healing. Next to her, Webb stood at attention despite the visible scars from his injuries. The hall was massive, designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of species. Valorians with their compound eyes and multiple arms. Kraith with their translucent skin and melodic voices. Silvari flickering with emotional light patterns. And humans, still a minority in the coalition, but no longer overlooked. Today was a memorial service for the 847 coalition personnel who had died at Kepler's Edge. Holographic images floated above the assembly, faces of the fallen from every species. Chen recognized many of them, fellow captains she had fought alongside, crew members who had served with distinction. But it was also a ceremony of recognition. The coalition was acknowledging what had happened, what had changed in that desperate battle. Fleet Commander Thaxoon approached the central podium. His ceremonial armor gleamed under the hall's lights. When he spoke, his voice was amplified across the vast space, translated simultaneously into dozens of languages. "We gather today to honor the fallen and to remember the Battle of Kepler's Edge. It was a battle we were losing. Our ammunition was depleted. Our ships were damaged. The enemy outnumbered us 3-1. By all logical calculations, we should have been defeated." Thaxoon paused, his mandibles clicking in a pattern Chen now recognized as deep emotion. "But we did not lose. We survived because one crew, one ship, chose to do what no one else had considered. Commander Sarah Chen and Lieutenant Marcus Webb turned their vessel into a weapon when all other weapons had failed. In doing so, they demonstrated something the coalition had forgotten in our long history of calculated warfare." He gestured, and a holographic image appeared above the assembly. The Indomitable, whole and proud before the battle. We had forgotten that sometimes survival requires not careful calculation, but bold action, not measured risk, but total commitment. The image shifted, showing the moment of impact. The brilliant explosion as the Indomitable struck the Zerakian flagship. Even in holographic replay, the destruction was awe-inspiring. Several species in the assembly made sounds of distress or amazement. "The humans call this doing whatever it takes," Thaksun continued. "They understand that when faced with extinction, there is no calculation too bold, no risk too great. This is not recklessness. This is strategic audacity." Thaksun turned to face Chen and Webb directly. "Commander Sarah Chen, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, please approach." Chen and Webb walked to the podium, their footsteps echoing in the silent hall. Every eye in the assembly was on them. Chen kept her spine straight, her expression neutral, though her heart was pounding. "By the authority granted to me by the Coalition Defense Council," Thaksun said formally, "I present you with the Star of Valor, the Coalition's highest military honor. This is awarded to those who demonstrate extraordinary courage in the face of impossible odds." Thaksun's 4 hands worked together, placing a crystalline medal around each of their necks. The crystal pulsed with inner light, reacting to their body heat. It would shine as long as they lived, a permanent mark of recognition. "But this ceremony is about more than individual honor," Thaksun continued. "It is about how the Coalition moves forward. We face an enemy that will not stop, that cannot be negotiated with. The Zerakians will return. When they do, we must be ready not just with weapons and ships, but with the will to use every tool at our disposal." He turned to address the full assembly. "We are integrating human tactical philosophy into Coalition military doctrine. We are learning that there is a place for calculated risk, for bold action, for strategic audacity. We are learning that sometimes the impossible is simply what no one has tried yet." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Some species sounded approving, others seemed uncertain. Chen understood. For species that had fought wars with careful calculation for centuries, this was a radical shift. A Kraith representative stood, her voice melodic but firm. "Fleet Commander, with respect, are we not risking our strategic stability by embracing such dangerous tactics?" Thaksun's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "We are not abandoning calculation or strategy. We are expanding our tactical options. The Battle of Kepler's Edge proved that conventional warfare alone cannot defeat the Zerakians. We need innovation. We need adaptability. We need to be willing to do what the enemy does not expect." He gestured to Chen. "Commander, would you share your thoughts?" Chen hadn't expected to speak. She looked out at the assembled representatives. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds, all watching her. She thought about what to say, how to explain the human perspective in a way they would understand. "The Zerakians fight by assimilation," Chen said, her voice steady. "They learn from every battle, absorbing the tactics and technology of those they defeat. If we fight them with only calculated, predictable strategies, we give them exactly what they need to defeat us." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Humans don't fight to lose. We fight to survive. And survival sometimes means doing things that seem crazy or impossible. But we don't do these things blindly. We calculate the odds. We weigh the costs. And then, when we decide to act, we commit completely." A Silvari commander spoke up, his skin patterns flickering rapidly. "You speak of commitment, but Commander, you and your crew nearly died. Your ship was destroyed. Is this a price we can afford to pay repeatedly?" Chen met his gaze. "We didn't win because we were willing to die. We won because we were willing to do whatever it took to live. There's a difference. Death wasn't the goal. It was the risk we accepted to achieve the goal, which was survival for millions of people." Webb stepped forward, speaking for the first time. "If I may add something, before the battle we ran calculations. We knew the kinetic energy our ship would generate. We knew the expected damage radius. We evacuated our crew because we calculated we only needed 2 pilots. We set up dead man switches because we calculated we might not survive the approach. Everything we did was based on mathematics and physics. He looked at Chen, then back at the assembly. The difference is that we were willing to put those calculations into action, even when it meant risking everything. That's not recklessness. That's commitment to the mission. Thaxoon clicked his mandibles in approval. Precisely. What humanity has taught us is not to abandon reason, but to couple reason with will, to calculate not just what is probable, but what is possible, and then to make it happen through determination and sacrifice. The assembly hall was quiet for a long moment. Then, one by one, representatives from different species began to signal approval in their own cultural ways. Valorians clicked their mandibles. Kraith hummed harmonics. Silvari skin patterns shifted to bright, agreeable colors. After the ceremony, Chen's crew found her in one of the hall's side chambers. They surrounded her and Webb, their relief and joy obvious. Rodriguez, the chief engineer, had tears in her eyes. "We thought you were dead, Commander," she said. "When the Indomitable exploded, we thought—" "I know," Chen said gently, "but we made it. Thanks to your modifications. The engines performed exactly as you calculated." "What happens now?" asked Ensign Park, one of the junior officers. "We don't have a ship anymore." Chen smiled. "Actually, about that. Fleet Commander Thaxoon told me this morning that the Coalition is commissioning a new ship. They're calling it Indomitable 2, and they've asked me to captain it." The crew erupted in cheers. Rodriguez grabbed Chen in a careful hug, mindful of her healing injuries. "Same crew? If you'll have me as your captain again," Chen said. "Always, Commander," Webb said, speaking for all of them. Later that evening, Chen stood on an observation platform overlooking the memorial park. The wreckage of the original Indomitable had been recovered from the debris field and placed here as a monument. The twisted hull fragments were lit by soft lights, creating shadows that seemed to move in the twilight. Thaxoon found her there. The Valorian commander stood beside her in silence for a moment, looking at the wreckage. "I have been thinking about our conversation," Thaxoon said finally, "about what it means to fight like a human. I believe I am beginning to understand." "And what's your understanding?" Chen asked. "You see war not as a calculation to be solved, but as a problem to be overcome. You use calculation, yes, but you are not bound by it. When the mathematics says defeat is certain, you change the mathematics." Chen considered this. "That's actually a good way to put it." "The Coalition is changing because of you," Thaxoon continued. "Already, tactical instructors are developing new courses. We are studying what you did, trying to understand not just the action itself, but the thinking that led to it. We call it the human doctrine, calculated boldness, strategic audacity. Just don't use it as an excuse for recklessness," Chen warned. "What we did at Kepler's Edge worked because we prepared carefully. We ran the numbers. We made sure the math added up. The boldness came in our willingness to act on those calculations, not in ignoring them." "Understood. But tell me, Commander, when you made that proposal to use your ship as a weapon, were you certain it would work?" Chen was quiet for a moment, remembering that moment in the briefing room. The desperate calculation, the terrible certainty of what needed to be done. "No," she admitted. "I wasn't certain. There were too many variables, but I knew it had a chance of working, and a chance was better than the certainty of defeat." Thaxoon's mandibles clicked in what Chen had learned was admiration. That is the lesson the Coalition needed. That sometimes a chance is enough. That sometimes you must act despite uncertainty. They stood together in the growing darkness, looking at the monument to what had been sacrificed. But Chen found herself thinking not about what was lost, but about what lay ahead. A new ship, her crew reunited, and a coalition that was learning to fight in new ways. The Zorakians would return, that was certain. But when they did, they would face a different enemy. Not just ships and weapons, but a philosophy of combat that refused to accept defeat. They would face the human doctrine, and they would learn what the coalition had learned at Kepler's Edge, that when humanity runs out of ammunition, they don't surrender. They find another way. Chen touched the crystalline metal still hanging around her neck. It pulsed warmly against her hand, a reminder that she had survived, that her crew had survived, that millions of civilians had survived because of what they had done. Tomorrow, she would tour the construction yards where Indomitable 2 was being built. She would review crew assignments, study new tactical data, prepare for the battles to come. But tonight, she would stand here and remember the ship that had become a weapon, remember the choice that had saved them all. Remember that humanity's greatest weapon had never been its technology or its firepower. It was the refusal to give up, even when giving up seemed like the only logical choice. The stars burned cold overhead, infinite and eternal. Somewhere out there, the Zorakians were regrouping, preparing for their next assault. Let them come. The coalition would be ready. And if they ran out of ammunition again, well, Chen knew exactly what to do. They would throw the ship.